These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they are described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. Careful what you say at breakfast in a hotel. When I was around 22 years old, I had a scary encounter while staying at a hotel for a job. Around 2010, I was working for a traveling photography group that took church directory photos. Each photographer drove separately from all over the place. So I was in Harlan, Iowa at the time. I was staying at a hotel along with other photographers who joined me. I believe there were 4 of us, 2 guys, a girl, and myself. One morning, I went down to breakfast and was watching TV in the hotel breakfast area. Someone was also down there, nearby a guy. When he looked at me, I said, "Good morning," as I do wherever I go, just to be friendly. He said it back, and we had just a polite exchange. Something you would do with a stranger you never thought you would see again. He mentioned he was staying there with his team for a construction job. I go to leave, and I say something very casual like, "Have a good one. See you later." He said something like we could hang later. I didn't think anything of it and just brushed it off like, yeah, maybe. I don't remember if it was the same day or not, but as I didn't work until 11 a.m., we tend to work from like 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. give or take depending on size of the church, etc. I decided to go take a nap since I didn't sleep well the night before. While laying in my room, I kept receiving phone calls to my room phone. I wasn't used to getting calls like that ever, so I just picked up. I would say hello, but nobody would answer. After a few times, I eventually just took the receiver off and placed it beside the phone so it would stop ringing. When it was time to get up and leave, I left my room and saw the guy was there in the hall. I waved casually, still not thinking anything of it. He asked where I was going, and I said I had to go to work. My friend showed up, female photographer, and I went with her to her car as I was going to ride with her to the church. I told her about getting strange phone calls, and she mentioned she did as well. Later that night, there was a thunderstorm. My photographer group and I stood by the hotel lobby door watching the lightning. It was thundering and extremely dark. There were chances for tornadoes, so we were keeping tabs with each other. Eventually, I go to my room for the night, and I hear a knock on my door. I didn't really want to answer it. However, I did, cracking the door to see who it was. It was the guy. He talked about how I said we could hang out, and I told him I was too tired after working all day and I needed to sleep. I shut the door. Now, I can't remember if this was the next morning or still night, but I recall him knocking again, but I wouldn't answer. I pretended to either be out or sleeping. I called my mom and started talking to her. I told her what was happening, and although I was scared, I almost acted like I wasn't when speaking with her. Suddenly, I had a weird feeling. I whispered to my mom, "Mom, hold on a second. I need to check something." I tiptoe as quietly over to my room door as possible. I look out the peephole, and I see him. I then see him turn his head to my door as if he was listening for something. My heart started to race. I then saw him move to the side. You know how the wall sometimes goes in for the doors, so there's like an indentation in the hallway for each room. Well, he goes to the wall away from the room that juts out. I think he thought he was hiding because he would try to lean his head around the corner of the jut-out portion as if listening for something. I walked to the furthest side of my room quietly and whispered to my mom about how I'm scared. I called the front desk to complain like my mom suggested. I can't remember if I also texted my friend or called her, but she also complained to the front desk about the various phone calls she received. Eventually, we were given new rooms, and the construction group manager was told by the hotel about one of his guys, and that creepy guy was told to stay away from us. I even told some of the church people about the situation, and they all said if we needed to stay with them, we could. All very nice, but still all strangers to me, and I didn't trust anyone at that point. I'm not sure what happened to him, as I didn't see him after that. I was a little jealous of my friend because she ended up with a hot tub in her room, and I didn't, but it was fine. However, after that, I was more aware and careful with who I talked to and what I said. Story 2. The employee told me there was a women's bathroom up the lift. There wasn't one. This happened 2 days ago, and I'm still very shaken up about it. I was with my brother and father. We were just at the immigration department in HK to sort something out for us. Further context: I'm 20F, and I'm not HK local. It was getting late, and my dad suggested we start taking the bus back now to eat closer to the apartment area, or most good places will be close by then. Midway, there was a stop that my brother suggested we get off and find food. We all agreed. I started to desperately need the toilet, and so my brother pointed at the closest McDonald's we could see. Big mistake. We go in, my brother and dad are waiting downstairs. I was under the assumption that, well, if there's no toilet downstairs, then there should be one up. If not, I'll leave and find another place. I walk up the stairs and look around, somewhat pacing as I desperately need to pee. The McDonald's worker seems to have spotted me and was looking at me, almost expecting me to bother him. I asked him if there's a toilet. He said, "Toilet? Through the door, turn left, and take a lift up." It's an ominous brown door with no signs or anything at the front. He's the worker, so I assume he knows better than me. I open it, and what the fuck? It's very dark and run down, a completely different vibe to the modern McDonald's. Extremely quiet. As soon as the door closed, it was almost soundproofed. All the bustling, loud noises in the McDonald's had completely stopped. The room was just very dark with minimal white light. There were multiple doors that appeared locked in the building. I didn't explore much as I thought it was maybe a staff room. I turned the left corner as instructed, and there was indeed a lift. I assume maybe this is just a very odd passage to a shopping mall, which isn't too uncommon in Hong Kong, and surely how bad can this be if there is a lift? I press the lift and step in. Suddenly I hear the door open, and the worker that directed me goes into the lift with me as well. I notice he's holding a black bin bag that is filled with little to nothing. I assume, oh, okay, maybe he needs to put this out and help me find a toilet. Kill two birds with one stone. I ask him what floor I press, and he presses the second floor. Once the door closes, it's a bit quiet and awkward. I glance at him for a second. He was wearing a COVID face mask. One eye looking forwards, and he had a lazy eye looking to the side. Suddenly, he says, "Lang ho long," which translates to "you're very pretty" in Cantonese. At this point, it's very awkward, and I just said a quiet thank you to not aggregate him. I'm wagering if I actually need to pee this badly now. The lift stops, finally. I was fully expecting a shopping mall when the lift doors open. That was not the case. The doors opened, and it was just a dark, quiet, very run-down, narrow hallway of doors. It was so dark with infinite corners. Not a single person was there, but us. I couldn't tell what the building was, an odd cross of abandoned apartment, building doors and office doors. At this point, we're both still standing in the lift, and my entire body is in a fight or flight response, as this whole situation was making me fear the worst. The worker gestures to me to get off at this lift and almost wants to continue walking me to the toilet. I quickly make an excuse of, "I've bothered you so much already from your work. You could just point at the direction and I'll find it. Promise." He points to the right and tells me to go through there, and that's the toilet. I thank him and then go the complete opposite direction he told me. The whole place was like a fucking maze, narrow hallway with doors. I got curious and pushed at one of them, and it was locked. At this point, I'm really trying to stall enough time to appear. I went to the toilet before getting the lift back down. I get a call from my brother now, a very angry call asking why I've taken so long and where I am. I explain I don't know where I am. I'm trying to find my way back. I hang up, and I'm getting increasingly more scared as the place is giant. As I mentioned, like an abandoned office/apartment hallways with no signs or anything, while being extremely dark with minimal light. The walls were all teared down. It's just so quiet and run down. There was no way a functioning toilet was up here. I'm really panicking now and trying to find my way back to the lift, scared shitless. My initial discomfort of desperately needing to pee turned to desperately wanting to leave. I calmed myself down a bit with breathing exercises and tried to recollect the steps I took. Finally found the lift and quickly pressed back down. I pressed the close button so much. The lift takes me back down to the hallway, but by accident I walk forwards instead of turning right. What the fuck? There are more doors, 4 to 5 doors next to each other, But what was the most strange was the fact the doors were all facing this large glass panel wall between the McDonald's. I was able to look at the McDonald's and people eating, but they didn't notice I was there at all. I walked back and turned right this time, through the door. I was finally in the McDonald's again, but that glass wall on my end appeared to be a large mirror in the McDonald's. It was a double mirror. I looked around, and there was no sight of the McDonald's worker either. I quickly walked back down the McDonald's. I see my dad and brother. My dad asked if I was okay as I looked really pale. I said I'll tell him when we're out. I asked him if he saw the worker again when they were waiting, describing him as a man with a mask on and a lazy eye. My dad shook his head and said he didn't see any workers when he checked upstairs from me earlier. My heart dropped as soon as I heard that. The worker was still up the lift. My dad also said, "Don't tell me you went through that lift." I opened that door and walked through a bit to find you. It was scary. Why were there so many doors in that glass? I thought there was something wrong, so I got out immediately. Bear in mind my dad is a built-as-fuck man himself. He then sent my brother up to go look for me. Not sure why, my brother is pretty skinny and unathletic in comparison. He opened the brown door just to see and nope the fuck out. He described it as looking like a big dark back rooms with the doors next to each other back to back. He and I want to walk in there to explore. I will never go to the toilets alone again, and seeing a McDonald's will forever hold this memory for me. Edit. Found out recently. Apparently, they devised a plan that my dad was going to go through every level through the brown door to start kicking down doors and shouting my name. He had a very bad feeling. If he wasn't back down with me within 15 minutes, my brother was instructed to call the police. My brother disagreed with the plan, suggesting it'll be best if they find all the exits and guard them now, banking on the fact I'll be out at some point, as it's unlikely they'll find me through every level in that lift and doors. I asked what would happen if I didn't come out through the exits, and he said, "At least we'll find your remains." Morbid. Story 3. I was stalked in 2024 by a minor, and it was hell. To preface this, I am currently 19 going on 20. Due to a vindictive teacher, she manipulated the grades, so I would have to repeat the 3rd grade because I called another student a brat for crying about wanting her mom. The context behind is irrelevant, but the downfall is this girl thought, because her mom was a teacher, she could cry her way into her mom's class. Her mom was a high school teacher and would almost always cry and cry until she was allowed to go, and her poor would be distraught having to leave her class and pick her daughter up because she wanted attention. I ended up snapping and telling the girl she's in the 3rd grade and is too old to be crying for her mom and disrupting other students leaving. Probably harsh, but you could tell this girl was spoiled. On to the actual person in question. In August of 2023, I was in my junior year. I went to a trade school in Sumner County for graphic design. A sophomore named James had taken notice that I wouldn't be dropped off at our home school like he was. He offered to drive me home. I didn't know this kid well. I spoke to him a few times, but other than that, I wasn't buddy-buddy with him. I told him my mom prefers to meet people before just letting me ride in a random person's car, especially a guy. With me being 18 at the time, I told him that if he got into a wreck, I would be responsible as the adult in the car. After that, he didn't really bother me with anything. We still talked, and could tell he wasn't neurotypical. It wasn't until my senior year that things got creepy. We exchanged numbers because I would sometimes help him with homework he didn't fully understand and give recommendations of horror channels on YouTube, such as Reddit stories, creepypasta readings, or channels that cover disturbing videos like Hannah the Horrible, Nick Crowley, Nexpo. Within a month, he found my home address. I never told him where I lived, and he got dropped off way earlier than me. The way the homeschool worked was that all the students on the west side of Fontaine going into Solani would go to one singular middle school and high school, while students from East Fontaine going into Liuea would go to another high school. I never told this kid where I lived, let alone a rough area. I started documenting everything at this point, no matter how big or small. The following months, if I would fall asleep on the bus, he would tap my headphones, snap them on my ears, kick my legs, shake me, or call my phone just so I would talk to him. In April, he asked me to go to prom with him, and I tried to tell him multiple times that I wasn't interested, and he tried to manipulate me, to which I just lied to him and told him that I had a family event that day. After that, I said something to the principal of him harassing and shaming people to go to prom, and he gave the most insincere apology ever. He worded it like he was forced to apologize. I got a phone call the next day from him asking if my sister drove a red car and worked at Sangonomiya Coffee House. I quickly told him no and blocked his number. I went to administration, coupled with the fact this kid would call to ask if I went to the Dollar General, went to work, or if I was at home, told me thoughts he had about killing his mom's boyfriend, how he wants to smash his teeth in, smacking his phone against the window, and tried to manipulate me into calling while he was having a panic attack, and ranted about how my math teacher needed to be gutted because she was overweight and that fat women are ugly and horrible vessels for producing babies. She's not overweight from poor diet. She has a medical condition that caused a buildup of estrogen. The worst was when he lashed out in anger about him losing his AirPod case and aggressively stomping on his AirPods and literally foaming at the mouth. I went to the principal and liaison after this only to be unable to talk, and they yelled at me for an hour about how I was being mean to a kid on the spectrum and that my information, my mother's information, and my sister's information is public information. I started having a panic attack and called my mom. At this point, I was literally vomiting in the trash can of the conference room. My mother was pissed. My mother told me to call the sheriff's office after I get home. The sheriff actually went to this kid's house and told him to knock this shit off, or I had every right to file stalking and harassment charges. The 180 Women's Shelter confirmed that what the principal and liaison did was disgusting and dangerous. So far, I haven't seen him, and I still have his number blocked. Hopefully, I don't see this little bastard anymore. To James, if you see this post by some chance, stay the fuck away from me and my sister. I hope your future general finds out about this shit. Yeah, that's right. This fucker wants to be in the goddamn army. Should I see him again, I won't hesitate to press charges against him. I don't care if it ruins his life forever. He's a danger to those around him and potentially himself. Story 4. I had a creepy hostile roommate and didn't realize how bad it was until the last day. A few years ago, I was traveling solo in South Korea after finishing a semester abroad in Japan. I was 21, still pretty naive and carefree. My friends had already flown home, so I figured I'd explore Seoul on my own for a few days before heading back to Japan and then home. I booked a hostel in Gangnam, a safe neighborhood, which had good reviews. But I made one big mistake. I booked a mixed dorm. I thought mixed meant a blend of people, but when I got there, it was just me sharing a room with 5 men. I told myself it was fine. I was just there to sleep. Most people in hostels are chill anyway, right? For the most part, that turned out to be true. I even went out for dinner with 2 of the guys staying there, and they were really nice. But one of them gave me weird vibes from the very beginning. Something about him just felt off. I tried to brush it off thinking that maybe he was just awkward or shy. I didn't want to judge too quickly, so I stayed friendly but kept my distance. Still, the red flags kept stacking up. Every morning when I got ready and did my makeup at the little vanity table, he would just stand behind me, staring silently through the mirror, not saying anything. Just watch me. When I asked if he needed something, he'd always say no and keep watching until I got visibly uncomfortable and irritated. He also kept asking me when I planned to shower, even though we had shared but separate bathrooms with stalls. No reason he should be concerned about my schedule. He'd always ask what I was doing each day and wanted to hang out constantly. I politely declined every time. Then one day, I randomly ran into him at a subway station nowhere near the hostel. I had just visited Deoksagung Palace, and when I was about to head back, there he was. I played it off, but it made me uneasy because what were the odds? I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid. I didn't want to cause drama, and honestly, I was still dumb and trusting back then. But my last morning was the last straw for me. I woke up early, still half asleep, and drifted back to sleep. The next time I opened my eyes, he was sitting by my bedside, leaning over me, stroking my face and my shoulder. I shot up immediately and was like, "What the hell are you doing?" He didn't give me a real answer, but just mumbled something vague. I felt sick to my stomach. I got up, packed my things, and told him I was checking out. He kept following me around the room, trying to make conversation like nothing had happened. I dropped the friendly act completely and started snapping at him, asking if he wasn't going to pack too, reminding him that his flight wasn't until way later. And then he said, "I really like you." I told him that was inappropriate, considering we'd only known each other for 5 days. He replied, "Sometimes you just know." He kept saying he wanted to meet again, maybe in Europe someday. We were both European, and tried to get my number. I refused. He pushed. Eventually, I gave it to him just to get him to back off, knowing I'd block him anyway. Nothing technically happened, I guess, but I still felt disgusted, and I was furious at myself for being polite for so long. But at the same time, being too firm might have triggered something worse. He felt unpredictable. That was the first and last time I ever stayed in a mixed dorm. I've stayed in female-only dorms ever since, and I've never had an experience like that again, thankfully. Story 5. I once went hiking with this guy. He showed me a dead body. This started when I was at my childhood friend's apartment for what was supposed to be a fun little movie night. We hadn't hung out in a while, and we were catching up. Her place was cozy, a little disorganized, and full of girly decor. We were in our comfiest sweatpants about to watch princess movies. Her apartment isn't the most tidy. Things are a bit scattered around, but it's clean and so authentic, which always made me feel at home. We decided on ordering pizza for dinner. She mentioned that Sherwood, someone I hadn't met yet, would bring the pizza over. At first, I was not happy to hear that. I thought that meant she had invited other friends, a boy, over to join us, which wasn't what I had in mind. But I was in for a surprise. Sherwood turned out to just be her delivery guy for the night. He wasn't joining us. When he got to the apartment, there was this awkward air about him. He was obviously nervous, fumbling a bit with the pizza boxes and not quite making eye contact. My friend introduced us quickly, and it was clear from her overly thankful demeanor that Sherwood did a lot more for her than just fetch dinner. After handing us the pizza, there was this brief moment of forced small talk. My friend was super nice to him despite his awkwardness. He wasn't the best conversationalist and seemed really out of place. Then Sherwood asked for my number. I was in a tough spot because our mutual friend was sitting right there, so I just gave it to him. Yeah, we chatted for maybe 5 minutes before my friend gave him a cue to leave with something like, "Thanks so much for dropping this off." He seemed to get the hint. We both gave him a hug before my friend said something like, "Drive safe," giving him another kind of cue to leave. When I asked my friend what that was all about, she basically explained that Sherwood was her unpaid personal assistant. He did her grocery shopping, he dropped off pizza, and he did all this other stuff. I think Sherwood was just a really lonely guy desperate for interaction, especially female interaction. My friend and I were both young and immature back then. We were about 23, but I think we both knew something was seriously wrong with Sherwood. It was a little hard to articulate because we couldn't point out exactly what his problem was. Sherwood started a group chat with my friend and me. He just sent a meme or two every week. It felt like he was trying to stay relevant without being intrusive. Maybe he was used to being sidelined or even blocked by other girls in the past. It felt like he was trying to make me remember him, but also carefully try not to give me a reason to block him too. I can't speak on his behalf. That's just what it felt like. Sherwood also offered help with errands. The first time, I said, "Thanks for asking, but no." He asked every weekend after that. One day, I made the mistake of accepting his help. I knew better. I had recently found a great deal for a new washing machine on Craigslist, but I had no idea how to pick it up and install it. When I mentioned in the chat, Sherwood excitedly volunteered to take care of the whole thing. He handled the whole pickup and installation like a total champ, which saved me so much hassle. I tried to pay him for his efforts because I wanted to show appreciation, but he wouldn't accept any money. I insisted. Eventually, he suggested that I could repay him by joining him for a hike. Like what? I was uneasy about this. It felt a bit too personal and almost like it could be mistaken for a date. But Sherwood framed it as nothing more than a friendly outing, like a transaction to balance out the favor. I agreed to the hike. I rationalized it by telling myself it was fair trade for installing the washing machine and that it was genuinely a form of payment, especially since I didn't think he had too many friends. This hike felt like maybe a way for him to have some companionship. I thought it might be nice helping him. Part of me was still uneasy about spending time with him in such an isolated setting. The day of the hike, Sherwood picked this trail that was nearby. I had been there before. It's gorgeous. As we walked along together, he chatted about ordinary things like work, the weather, and his hobbies. Everything seemed normal until he suggested we go off the main path to see something special he wanted to share. Like, what could that even mean? We reached this secluded spot, and there, oh my gosh, was a dead body. My heart pounded so violently as Sherwood stood there, so eerily calm and nonchalant. The casualness in his demeanor made me feel even more uneasy. It felt like he wasn't just showing me a dead body, but also revealing this darker side of himself. It smelled bad, but not like in the movies. I didn't know how long it had been there. I'm not a biologist, but my guess is that it had smelled a lot worse before, but now it had gone down. At that moment, I mumbled some excuse about needing to get back quickly and started walking briskly towards the main path. I was urging Sherwood to follow me. I thought maybe this was some twisted mind game, like a way to intimidate me or show that he wasn't just some harmless little boy. Maybe he was trying to send a message that said, "You should know I'm familiar with things like this." Oh, there's another possibility. Maybe he just wanted me to think about him more. Sometimes when I talk to people, I feel like they only notice me for the time that we're together, and then they won't think of me again until the next time we meet. It's possible Sherwood felt that way with me, and maybe he thought showing me a dead body would make him less forgettable. I have no idea, but on the surface, he seemed oblivious to how inappropriate this was. As we walked back together, I was in full fight-or-flight mode, instinctively looking around to see if there were other hikers or rangers, anyone who could make me feel like I wasn't alone. The moment I spotted someone else on the trail, I called out, not to expose Sherwood, but just asking for directions back to the parking area. I wanted to make sure Sherwood and I wouldn't be left alone together. I asked this gentleman to walk us back to the parking lot. I wasn't going to take no for an answer. I kept pretending like I was confused about his directions, and eventually he agreed to just walk us there. Getting help from that guy was my way of re-anchoring myself to safety and normality while I was still under the shock of what Sherwood had shown me. We got to the parking area. There, I called my friend and told her I was with Sherwood. I suggested he could drop me off with her and that we'd be there in 20 minutes. Sherwood agreed. That was my way of making sure that if anything happened, it was on the record that Sherwood was the last person to have been with me. Also, I immediately texted my friend what had happened to get that on the record too. When I got to her apartment, we said thanks to Sherwood and kindly told him to go away. I had already told her through text, but then I started going into all the details. The fact that the body had insects, the fact that the face was decomposing but still recognizable, etc. Her reaction was pure horror. Not just about the dead body, but also how nonchalantly Sherwood had treated the whole situation. She confessed she always sensed something was off about him, even though she'd never imagined anything this disturbing. We both agreed that we needed to remove Sherwood from our lives. She admitted she felt stuck, and she had become too reliant on Sherwood to just fire him cold turkey. We planned out how we would do it. It was this gradual phasing out plan. We would limit our interactions to times when others were present. We would slowly reduce our responses to his texts. I would never ask for his help again, and my friend would ask for less and less help. Sherwood kept texting during weekends, offering to run errands or asking if we needed anything, to which my friend would reply, "I'm trying to work on being more independent, but you've really been such a help." Eventually, as my friend started dating someone new, she introduced Sherwood to her boyfriend. Sherwood never contacted her after that. I had called the cops the same night of the incident, but it was a while before we heard more news about it. At least a full month later, a news report confirmed discovering a dead body in that area where Sherwood had taken me hiking. They made an arrest, not of Sherwood, but of this other guy that Sherwood followed on Instagram. I have no idea if Sherwood was connected to the murder. Reflecting on everything, I think there's one clear moral of the story. Trust your instincts. Story 6. The time I was hunted. Back in 1998, I was a pretty broke 19-year-old guy and living with a roommate named Steve. Steve was about my age, maybe a year older. His dad had died a few years prior and had left Steve a trust fund which covered all his bills and gave him a weekly allowance on top of it until he reached a certain age, at which time he'd receive his full inheritance. Steve and I got along pretty well, but he was the kind of guy who liked to remind you if he had some degree of power over you. That aspect of his personality butted up against my own stubborn, prove-the-world-wrong attitude on a particular night, leading to the events I'm about to describe. Steve and I went over to my friend Trevor's house on Siesta Key one night. Steve drove, as I didn't have a car. I don't remember why we went over there, and I don't even know that I really remember any other instance of the three of us hanging out. I just know that we went there later in the evening, maybe 9 o'clock or so. At some point, Steve and I got into a disagreement over something. I have no memory of what it was about, except that I seem to recall that it wasn't anything important that actually impacted our lives in any way. Something akin to disagreeing over a bit of movie trivia or something as inconsequential as that. Steve must have felt that he was losing the debate because he took the opportunity to remind me that he had the car and I could always walk home. Now, there are a few things to note here. First, home would be a 13-mile walk. I could not have told you that at the time, but I just looked it up for this telling. Second, we were at my best friend's house. I had stayed over there countless times and absolutely could have that night. Third, my best friend also had a car and would likely have given me a ride. So Steve's threat was completely empty, whether he realized it or not. But what was important to me at that moment was that Steve, the trust fund brat, wanted to exert control over me because his ego was bruised, and I was a stubborn hothead who would absolutely not stand for that shit. So I silently decided that I would walk home just to fucking spite him and show him that I wouldn't be intimidated. So a bit later, under the pretense of going to use the restroom, I left the room and quietly left the house and started the 13-mile walk home. I should note that while I knew this was a long walk, I didn't quite understand how long it was. But it didn't matter. I needed to prove my independence. It was probably 11 p.m. or so when I left the house. I anticipated that they'd come looking for me when they discovered that I had left, so I tried to stay off the main path as best I could, determined to make the whole walk in order to make my point. This may be a good place to remind you that this is 1998 and a good 2 or 3 years before I got my first cell phone. The first hour and a half went by without incident. I made my way all the way to downtown Sarasota. The more direct route would have been to follow the main road along the waterfront, but I cut through downtown, still looking to avoid Steve spotting me on his way back home. This is an area I was super comfortable with. I'd spent most of my childhood in the area, and especially in my teen years, had explored every nook and cranny of the downtown area. It was also a pretty affluent area, full of high-rise condos that look out over the Gulf of Mexico, and known for theater, opera, and art galleries. As such, even past midnight, it didn't feel menacing at all, just quiet and empty. The path I'd chosen through downtown went along Pineapple Avenue, which was mostly art galleries and upscale shops. As I walked along, I saw a red hatchback sitting in the middle of the road, just a little way past an intersection up ahead of me. I noticed it had no license plate, but didn't think too much of it. I figured it was a tag applied for kind of situation. As I got nearer, the car remained stopped. The interior light was on, and I could see there were 3 or 4 guys in there. The interior light being on made me assume they were looking at a map or something, though I couldn't make out the inside of the car well enough to see anything more than the general shapes of the people. As I crossed the small intersection, maybe 30 or 40 feet away from the car now, I suddenly got a really uneasy feeling. I don't know if the car was still for just too long or the figures inside too still or what. I just suddenly got to feeling very ill at ease. So, instead of continuing on, I casually turned down the left side street, and as soon as the corner of the building blocked me from their view, I bolted. This was a spot where a small access road ran behind these buildings and then connected to an alley and then another very thin alley that ran alongside a church and ended back on Pineapple Avenue, right where the red car was. I ran this sequence of alleys and popped out just in time to see the rear end of the car vanish down the side street I had run down. At this point, I wasn't scared at all. I had the idea that the guys in that car had something unpleasant in mind for me, but I knew damn well that I had given them the shake. There's no way in hell that they'd expect me to be back where they started. If they were looking for me, it was going to be elsewhere. So I continued along, feeling smug. After 10 or 15 minutes, I pretty much had to get out on the main road, because the alternative was walking through a seedy neighborhood that I wasn't nearly as confident about as I was downtown. As I approached the first big intersection along that main road, I saw the red car again up ahead, noticeable by the lack of license plate. I kind of grinned to myself about having foiled them. On this big road, there were some other cars here and there even at this late hour, so I felt less isolated and more at ease. Until I saw the car slow to a crawl, despite not being anywhere near the light yet. Suddenly, I found myself wondering if they might have spotted me again. So I decided to just cross to the other side of the street. It's a U.S. highway, so it's several lanes wide, with a median down the center. Being on the other side would put me a fair distance from them. But when I got to the other side, that's when I realized I was in actual danger. This red hatchback suddenly sped up, racing to the intersection ahead, and zipped over into the left lane, where it banged a tire-screeching U-turn to head back in my direction. Where I had crossed was a nice green space between the History Center and the Garden Club, where a gigantic tree stood. I think it was a banyan, but I could be mistaken. On the other side of that green space was a parking lot, some buildings, and the bay. I wasn't familiar enough with what was back there to be able to pull a trick like I had before, so I climbed. I got as high into that tree as I could, as fast as I could. I always dressed in all black back then, so I was pretty confident I'd be nearly impossible to spot, as long as they didn't actually climb up after me. So I got up and nestled into the most hidden spot I could and try not to make any noise at all. Hiding up in the tree, I was so surrounded by foliage that I couldn't see what was going on. On the plus side, that meant that they were really unlikely to see me. On the other hand, I didn't know what to prepare myself for. So I sat up there, running through scenarios in my head, trying to plan my next move. Even if I hadn't been outnumbered, flight was really my only option. As speedy and scrappy as I was, at 5 feet 3 inches, no fight I put up was likely to do much good. As I sat on that branch trying to plan my next move, my blood ran cold. Any remaining doubt about what was happening, any fleeting hope that I was just being paranoid, flew out the window as I heard car doors open and close, heard footsteps in the grass, and eventually an angry male voice say, "Where is this motherfucker?" Followed by a "Look over there. I'll check this area." It was official. I was being hunted. I don't know how long I stayed up that tree. It can't have been more than 10 minutes, and more likely, it was quite a bit less than that. But it felt like forever. At some point, I decided to risk another flight, though I can't remember what triggered it. Car doors? The car driving away? I just can't remember. I do remember jumping from the tree and landing with a hard thud and bolting back the way I had come as fast as I could, terrified that whatever sound made me feel like it was safe to come out of hiding had been a ploy to draw me out. At the intersection where they had made the U-turn was a 24-hour gas station. Of course, across both roads. All I could think was that if I could make it inside, I would be safe and I could call the police. That run is a total blur, but I remember going through the door. I remember the look on the clerk's face as she saw my panicked expression. I called the police and explained what happened, and I waited inside for them to arrive. When they got there, I went out front to meet them and explained everything to the only officer who actually spoke to me. He was not sympathetic. I had described the car in detail, as well as all the events, and he said that they probably thought I was a male prostitute and were trying to pick me up. I thought to ask him if prostitutes get a lot of business by fleeing from prospective Johns and hiding in trees, but I was distracted by the sight of the red hatchback slowly cruising by, watching me talk to the police. I pointed to the car and exclaimed that that was the car. The police seemed entirely uninterested. He glanced at the car for half a second and looked back at me and said, "What do you want me to do about it?" "I don't want to walk anymore," I exclaimed. I'm sure there were better ways I could have articulated that there were people attempting to capture me for unknown nefarious purposes and that I was in fear of my life should they encounter me on the street again, but "I don't want to walk anymore" was all I was capable of in that moment. The cop pointed to the side of the police car and said, "You see what it says there? It says police, not taxi." His condescending attitude was doing a great job to replace my fear with some of the brash attitude that had gotten me into this situation in the first place. So I replied, "It also says to serve and protect, and I'm asking you to protect me because I think I am in danger." He gave a sigh like a teenager asked to do the dishes and told me that he can't take me all the way because I lived in the next town and county over, but that he'd take me to the county line, which is another major intersection along that same main highway. That was still a good 5.5 miles from my house. Again, a number I just looked up for this telling, but got me off the road for almost 3 miles and made it less likely these people would find me again. The cops dropped me off in front of the museum, and I walked another 2 hours or so, looking over my shoulder constantly, ready to run down side streets or jump into bushes if need be. My girlfriend's house was slightly closer than my own, and, with the sun now rising, I knew she'd be okay with me stopping in. In the end, I made it safely and never saw that red car again. Almost 30 years later, I still sometimes wonder what might have become of me if they had gotten their hands on me. The determination they showed in pursuing me leads me to believe that nothing I can imagine, no matter how bad, is outside the realm of possibility. So, a hunting party in the red hatchback? Let's not meet. Story 7. The scariest experience of my life. Before I tell my story, I just want to say I'm aware of how dumb it is to do stuff like this, and I probably won't be doing this for a long, long time after what happened a few months ago. Anyway, I just really needed to post this, because I don't know who else to tell. About half a year ago, I had the scariest experience of my life. For context, I'm a dumb teenage boy who sneaks out every now and then just to walk around at night. I find something very peaceful walking around after dark, but my parents have never let me stay out past sunset. So for about a year, whenever school gets hard or just life in general gets stressful, I sneak out and just walk around for about 2 hours or so. Anyway, the night I'm talking about began with me deciding to go for another 2 AM ritual. I grabbed a sweatshirt, got on my shoes once I was outside, and hopped the fence to freedom. After I was safely away from my neighborhood, I took one of my usual routes, which is cutting through another neighborhood and walking onto a winding road, where I then walk down the middle of it and head toward a circle of shops and fast food restaurants. I was probably there for a solid chunk of time, just walking in the loop and ending up sitting on a bench. At some point, I picked up a plastic spoon on the ground and started to grind it against the pavement until the spoon part was half gone out of boredom. This is important later. I was chilling there for a bit before I decided to walk around a bit more, and I eventually ended up at a park like 10 minutes away from my neighborhood, where I usually end off the night just staring off into the sky. The park itself creeps me out sometimes because at night there's a huge ring of trees surrounding all sides of you, and anyone could watch from the woods. Anyway, shit starts to get real here because I'm staring up into existence, feeling like a philosopher while I'm laying on one of those table benches when I hear an old man whistle. I probably shot up because I had never had another human interaction on these walks. And I see this old man dimly illuminated by a street light by the only entrance of the park. I had seen him before. He's this tall, skinny white guy that walks around our town all day, and I would honestly think he was homeless if he wasn't wearing the same fancy button-up and cargo pants every day. Me and my mom have talked about him, and we think he's mentally disabled and probably lives with a caretaker. I had an interaction with him once. About a year ago, I was walking home in broad daylight when I passed the man who was at that time sitting on a bench. Dude just looks at me and says, "Jesus loves you," with a weird little smirk on his face. I responded with an awkward, "I know," even though I'm an atheist and didn't really think much of it. Anyway, back to the park at night. I just stare at him in that empty parking lot probably way longer than I should have because he was already creeping me the hell out. I imagine we were staring at each other for a real long time before he slowly starts walking toward me. And at this point, I'm frozen in fear because why the fuck is this old white geezer out with me at like 3 AM in an empty park? I'm standing up at this point when he gets close to me and just gives me this cheeky grin like he knows something I don't yet. And I'm still just gawking at him like a fucking buffoon. Have you ever scoffed at a book or movie when the main character is frozen in fear? Well, I have. And I never will again, because at this point, I'm more frozen than I've ever been in my life. At some point, after probably like 10 seconds of awkward standing, he just kind of half pats and half grabs my shoulder and reaches in his pocket to pull out a plastic spoon. The same plastic spoon that I was holding about an hour ago at the shop plaza. He just kind of tucks it in my front sweatshirt pocket, and something just makes my mind snap out of my frozen stance because I absolutely fucking book it to the public bathroom and lock the door. I'm now in this dimly lit bathroom in the middle of the night, and I'm guessing at this time it was past 3 in the morning. I assumed that maybe he would leave once he saw me in my state of panic, but honestly, I don't think he ever left. I ended up looking closer at the plastic spoon, and it was altered. Have you seen that one viral AI-generated image where it looks completely normal at a glance, but you can't identify a single thing? If not, just search up Name one thing in this image. Now imagine that except a word carved onto a plastic spoon, but you can't read it or even identify any of the letters. I think I sat in that locked bathroom for over half an hour just contemplating every single decision I've made in the past year that led up to the nightmare I was in at that moment. To be clear, I had no phone or any way of contacting someone because my parents installed Life 360 on my phone and they can see my location whenever. I also had no watch or access to the outside to tell the time. I ended up gaining the courage to unlock the door and just absolutely rocket myself towards the exit of the park. Before I turned the corner, I looked back for a second and saw a figure sitting on the bench that was right next to the bathroom. This senile old man had waited outside for an hour just to see me one more time. I'm being completely honest when I say I held a full sprint until I got to my neighborhood, where I caught my breath behind a bush and then snuck back into my house. I haven't gone out at night since that experience, and I don't know if I'll ever sneak out again. I still have the spoon buried somewhere in my wardrobe, but I haven't looked at it in months. Sometimes I think about how long he was following me, and if it was an isolated incident, or if he had been stalking me on other late-night trips. I would love to hear your guys' opinion on the matter, unless you're here to lecture me about my actions, because trust me, I've already learned. Anyway, creepy old man that was stalking me that night. Let's not meet again. Story 8. How's your dad? I saw him yesterday. My dad was out of town for months. Back when I was 12, I went to a private school, so I needed to take a long walk to my apartment, since the school was a bit far from the city center. This was in Zagreb, Croatia, so I had a lot of public transport options to get home. My usual routine was to get on the bus at the station in front of my school all the way down to the main street, then take a tram to a public park and walk home the rest of the way. Our school had a double timetable, where one week we went to school in the morning and the other week we had classes in the afternoon. This happened during one of my afternoon weeks. I was walking out with a few classmates since we all got on the same bus to the main street. The rest of my classmates were picked up by their parents. When we got on the bus, there were a few empty seats, so I took a seat in front of a balding middle-aged man who was wearing slightly dirty clothes. That was my mistake. As soon as I sat down, he started staring at me, like staring with a cold look in his eyes. Feeling uncomfortable, I took a book out of my bag and started reading. I would have used my phone if I could, but it was dead since I forgot to charge it before I left the house that day. The guy did not stop staring at me the whole bus ride, to the point where I couldn't even concentrate on my book, but I refused to put it down because I was scared. I would have mentioned something to my classmates, but we were all spread out on the bus, and I was too scared to move. I don't know why, but I didn't want him to see that I was scared, thinking that maybe that would deter him. Or maybe I thought he was just staring at me for some stupid reason. When we finally got to our stop, my classmates and I all got off, and some of us headed to the tram station while the others walked away to their houses. The guy who was staring at me also got off with us, and he started tailing us while keeping a fair distance. I told one of my friends about this, but urged him not to look back, thinking ignoring him would be the best option. When we got to the station, different people got on different trams, since each of them had a different route. I needed to take the tram number 2, and so did my friend. We waited for it to arrive, and the guy was somewhere to our right, but we refused to look at him. When our tram arrived, my friend and I got on, but so did the creepy guy. When I arrived at my stop, I tried to quietly discuss with my friend if getting off with me, just in case, was a good idea, but then we saw the guy get off himself first and start heading into the park opposite of where I needed to go. He probably overheard us talking, since there were barely any people in the tram at that time. It was around 9 p.m., but I didn't think of that, so I thought it had all been a misunderstanding. When I got off, and the tram had sped away to the next station, I started walking home. It was a short distance and would have taken about 5 minutes, but then I noticed someone following me. I immediately knew it was the same guy again, so I picked up my pace and walked to my apartment. As I turned a corner into the alley that housed my apartment, the guy was getting closer. I got to the building and buzzed my mom on the intercom. I wish she would hurry up, but in the end, the guy managed to catch up with me. I could smell the stench coming off from him as he started talking. "Hey, have you been, buddy? I saw your dad yesterday, and he told me all about how you were getting on in that new school of yours," he said. And then I immediately knew that he was lying, since my dad had been away on work-related business for months and hadn't returned home in that time once. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there quietly staring at him. Just then, the door buzzed and unlocked, so I bolted for it. I managed to rush in and start running up the stairs, but he was following behind me, running himself. Never in my life have I felt such an adrenaline rush as I ran up the stairs to the third floor, and I had a backpack with books weighing me down, so I had a disadvantage. But in the end, I managed to arrive at our door, where my mom was happily waiting for me. With no warning, I shoved her away from the door as I entered before slamming it shut. Fortunately, the guy had enough common sense not to continue chasing after me. I told my mom what happened, and she called the police, and they arrived some time later, questioning me on how the guy looked and what exactly happened. In the end, they looked at the camera footage, but since it was so dark out and I didn't turn on the indoor building lights as I entered, they weren't able to get a clear view of his face. For 2 weeks, I was too scared to go home alone, so my mom picked me up every time until 2 weeks later, when on the news it was said how a man was arrested for attempted kidnapping and raping of children, and the face they showed was the exact one I saw that night. So I finally breathed a sigh of relief, knowing I was safe for now, but that didn't excuse the fact that I was careless with not charging my phone, and there were still many bad people out there. Everyone, please stay safe out there. To the person who I met, if you ever get released for some ungodly reason, I hope I never see your face again. Story 9. Man asked to take before photos. This happened in August of 2013. I was visiting Montreal for their diver site weekend, which was basically like Pride, but took place the long weekend before the official Montreal Pride. My best friend at the time had met a guy at Toronto Pride a month earlier, and he invited both of us to come there, so my friend wouldn't be uncomfortable going to spend the weekend with someone he didn't know well. We arrived on Thursday, and the trip was going great. We went out the first night, walked the streets that were closed off to cars the next day, and our host made us a nice dinner, and then we went out again Friday night. Just a quick note before I get into what happened. I partied quite a bit with drugs at this time, and I also in the past had a tendency to lose my cell phone. So for about a year prior, I stopped taking my cell phone whenever I went out. So that Friday night, we went out to a club, Parking, which sadly has since closed, and it was another fun night. The music was great, and the tequila shots were incredibly cheap. I was dancing and moving all around the club, but would circle back and check in with my friend and our host, and I would also run into people that I knew who were also visiting from Toronto, and ended up taking some MDMA from one of them. Danced some more until I was completely soaked in sweat. So I went to the bathroom to wipe myself down and pee. When I got into the bathroom, there was someone leaving, but it looked like I was the only one in there. I went and used the stall because I have a hard time using the urinal, and once I came out, I was quite surprised to see a man in the corner of the washroom smiling at me. He looked to be in his mid-30s, on the shorter side and a bit chubby. He was wearing a polo shirt and jeans and had glasses, and I remember thinking when I saw he reminded me of an accountant. Not sure why that thought popped in my head. I was pretty sure I didn't hear the door, but I couldn't be sure, so I just smiled back and said hello as I went to wash my hands. "Hello," he responded. "Are you having fun tonight?" I replied I was, and that the music was incredible, and was wiping myself down with paper towels and my shirt. "Do you want to have some Coke with me?" he asked. Now, this was not the first time I had been offered Coke in a bathroom at a nightclub, and had done this in the past, and ended up having some good experiences and met some interesting people. So I was already high and drunk and not thinking much of it. I said, "Sure, I would love to, thanks. I just live right near here. It's at my place if you don't mind coming over. We can do some lines and have a drink, then walk back to the club," he replied. Now, obviously, looking back, I realize how very dumb my following actions were, and I can't imagine myself being so stupid and careless now, but without thinking about it, I agreed, and I left with him. The club allowed you to re-enter if you had a wristband. We chatted on the walk over to his place. He asked me where I was from because I didn't seem like I was from Montreal, and what parties I had gone to and how old I was in my name. I asked his name, but he instead responded that we had arrived. The whole wall felt like 5 minutes, but I honestly hadn't been paying much attention to where we were walking. His apartment was in this building that had 3 floors, and his unit was on the 2nd floor, and you had to climb this long, narrow metal staircase, and his door seemed to be in the middle of 2 other apartments on either side. He unlocked the door and let me in first, flicked on the lights, and told me to make myself comfortable. I was walking and noticed he had carpet, so I turned around to ask him if I should take my shoes off when I noticed that he was locking the door from the inside with a key above the regular lock. And in that moment, I was overwhelmed with a feeling of dread like I had never felt before. The danger I had possibly put myself in another city, no phone, nobody knows where I am, and now seeing this person locking their door from inside with a key. I just thought to myself, I'll pretend I didn't see that. I won't take off my shoes and politely hang out for a few minutes, then ask to head back. I also thought I could be having an extreme overreaction to what I saw because I was high, but as I looked around, everything inside of me was just screaming, "You need to get out of here." I went and sat on the arm of the couch. He said I should take off my shoes and relax. I was getting a better look at him now in the lights of his apartment. He still looked plain and unassuming, but his eyes looked shifty, and he pulled down both of the shades on the windows that were on each side of the door. I told him that I was okay, and I was eager to get back to dancing, so he said he would make us drinks, then we could go back. The apartment looked much bigger inside than it did from the street. It was an open layout with the living room beside the kitchen, and then a hallway in the middle with closed doors painted black, and I could hear music coming from one of the doors. I asked him if someone else was there, as he came from the kitchen with a glass, and he replied no. As he handed me my glass, he looked me up and down. I wasn't wearing a shirt. He said with this increasingly creepy smile spreading across his face, "You have a very beautiful body, especially your chest. Would you mind if I took some photos of you before we went back?" Every alarm bell is going off in my head now, and all I can think about is Jeffrey Dahmer and all his Polaroids. And what am I going to do? Because that was such a creepy thing to say, and all I can manage is a polite laugh as I take the drink and say sure. Excellent. He says he then tells me to take off my shoes, and he's going to get the Coke and his camera and to finish my drink. He walks down the hall, takes out his keys, and unlocks the second door, and opens the door enough to slip in and closes it behind him. The second that door was closed, I jumped up, ran over to the sink and dumped my drink, put my shirt on, it had been tied around the belt loop of my shorts, and ran to the front door. I was able to turn and unlock the regular lock, but the door would not budge. I kept turning and pulling, but nothing. Then I heard from behind me, "What are you doing?" I turned around, and he was standing at the base of the hallway, with one of those professional cameras slung around his neck and holding a square mirror with a pile of white powder on it. I thanked him for the drink while gesturing to my empty glass, but that it was getting late and I wanted to get back, but we could exchange numbers and maybe meet up tomorrow. His demeanor slightly changed. He was still smiling, but his tone when he next spoke sounded irritated. He asked me if I was nervous about taking the photos and I should just wait for my drink to relax me, and I said no, that I wanted to go. This exchange of him telling me to stay and me saying no went back and forth for about a minute when he suddenly glared at me, put down the mirror, pointed at the couch, and said, "Sit down now." Not knowing what to do or how I was going to get out of this, I remembered that there were other units on each side of us, and it had to be around 2:30 in the morning at this point, so I just started screaming at the top of my lungs like a madman, banging on the door, the window, the wall. Shut up. Be quiet." He snapped at me as he ran to the door. He quickly unlocked and told me to get out and stepped aside. I bolted out that door and down the stairs, skipping the bottom steps, and hopped over the side of the railing. I looked up behind when I landed, and he wasn't there, but I heard a door slam and took off running down the street. I hadn't paid attention on the walk there, so I didn't know which way to walk, but I knew it was close, and luckily, I was able to wave down a passing taxi and take it back to the bar. When I got back to the bar, I found my friend in the same spot dancing. The whole incident must have been less than half an hour. I was too embarrassed about how stupid I had been, and being back in the club, I started to feel bad that I had just freaked out on this nice man. So I didn't say anything, but I stayed by his side until we left shortly after I got back. The entire thing felt quite surreal, and I remember the next day when I did tell my friend, kind of laughing it off and joking about getting murdered and trying to make light of it, because it was so scary, and it wasn't until years later after joining Reddit and this sub and reading other stories that I started to think about that night more and more and realized how much potential danger I put myself in. So strange man from the bathroom that lured me to his place and wanted to take, before photos of me, let's not meet ever again. Story 10. The Man in the Crawl Space. This happened to me about 5 years ago, and even now I get chills just thinking about it. I was renting a small house in a quiet neighborhood at the time. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was cozy, affordable, and had a lot of character. The only thing I didn't love was the crawl space under the house. The access door to it was in the laundry room, a square wooden hatch flush with the floor. It was locked from the outside, and I never had any reason to open it. I figured it was just pipes, cobwebs, and the usual creepy crawl space stuff. One evening, I came home late from work. It had been a stressful day, and all I wanted was to shower and collapse in a bed. As I stepped inside, I noticed something strange. My laundry room light was on. I was sure I had turned it off that morning, but I chalked it up to being absent-minded in my rush and turned it off again. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to a faint noise. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but as I lay there, I realized it was coming from the laundry room, a soft, rhythmic thumping sound. My heart started to race. I debated whether to get up and check or just stay in bed and hope it stopped. Curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed my phone for light and tiptoed to the laundry room. When I opened the door, everything was quiet. But then I saw it. The hatch to the crawl space was slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I distinctly remembered it being locked, and there was no way I could have accidentally opened it. Trying to stay calm, I convinced myself it might be an animal that had somehow gotten in. I shut the hatch tightly and placed a heavy box of detergent on top of it before going back to bed. The next day, I called the landlord to ask if there were any pest issues I should know about. He seemed surprised and said no one had reported anything like that before. Still, he promised to send someone over to check it out. That night, I double-checked the hatch and even put a chair on top of it for good measure. I didn't hear any noises, and I started to feel a little silly for being so freaked out. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I froze. My bedroom door doesn't creak unless you push it slowly, and I knew I had closed it before bed. I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing, as I heard soft footsteps shuffle into the room. My phone was on the nightstand, just out of reach. The footsteps stopped right next to my bed. I could feel someone's presence, their quiet breathing in the dark. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and swung it toward the intruder. There was a man, crouched on the floor, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes wide and unblinking. He looked just as startled as I was. I screamed and bolted out of the room, running outside to the neighbor's house. I banged on their door until they let me in, and they called the police. When the officers arrived, they found the man still in my house, hiding in the crawl space. He had a small mattress, some food wrappers, and a collection of random items he must have taken from my house. The lock on the hatch had been tampered with, and from the looks of it, he had been living under my house for at least a few days, maybe longer. The scariest part? The police said they found a notebook with detailed notes about me. He had written down my daily routine, when I left for work, when I came home, even what I wore. There was also a list of plans, though they wouldn't tell me what was on it. I moved out the next week and stayed with friends until I found a new place. To this day, I have no idea how he got in or how long he had been watching me before I noticed something was wrong. To the man in the crawl space, let's not meet. Ever. Story 11. Not all creeps are old men. Hello everyone. Major Lurker here, but I've decided to tell my story on Reddit to those who don't know me. I've scrolled Reddit for years now, but I've never actually set up an account, so here I am. I was 11 the first time I saw him. I had just gotten out of school, and I remember being hot and tired, but still excited because I had chore money in my backpack. $8 and some change, crumpled into my bag next to a mechanical pencil I found on the floor, that high-quality shit. That was enough for a happy meal. Nuggets, fries, a little toy I'd pretend I didn't care about, and a Sprite. Heaven. The McDonald's is only a few blocks from the school and up the hill from my apartment. My mom wasn't crazy about me walking around alone, but she also worked 2 jobs and couldn't pick me up most days. If I got home before 5 and didn't talk to strangers, she didn't ask too many questions. I kept my phone on 50% brightness to save battery, pretended like I was grown, and slid my earbuds in like I had somewhere important to be. That McDonald's became my little kingdom. Booth by the window, shoes kicked off under the table, watching YouTube Vine compilations on my cracked phone while sipping a Sprite like it was champagne. I had just discovered Tumblr that year. I was reposting Melanie Martinez fan edits and thinking I understood what the word aesthetic meant. I was 11 going on 20, or at least I thought I was. That's probably why I didn't think it was weird when he sat near me. He didn't work there. I knew that much. He was too old to be hanging around during school hours and didn't have a uniform. But the first time, I assumed he was waiting for someone. He had on this navy hoodie, sleeves pushed up, and a ragged backpack next to him like he also just got out of school. He looked maybe 17, 18 at the oldest, with a face like he'd just started growing into it. Tall, white boy, deep voice. He looked like one of those SoundCloud emo rapper dudes. "You draw?" he asked, nodding at my sketchbook. I shrugged, trying to act unbothered. "Kinda," I said. "Not like for real, for real." "You got talent," he said, and I felt my chest puff up just a little. Nobody ever said stuff like that to me, especially not older boys. At school, most of the guys my age were busy with whatever the popular trends were back then. This one, he looked me in the eye when he talked. Made me feel seen. The next time, he was already there. Same booth, same backpack, same easy smile when I walked in. "You again," he said. "Are you following me or something?" I laughed a little too loud. He always knew what to say to make me feel grown. He'd ask about school, about my drawings, about music. Then he started asking other stuff. Like what my background was, what kind of guys I liked. Said I didn't talk like the other black girls he knew, whatever that meant. I didn't even know how to respond to that one. But still, I came back. Week after week. Sometimes twice a week if I had extra change. And he was always there. Like it was planned. The first few weeks, the conversations felt like a secret game. He'd show up at McDonald's like clockwork, sometimes early afternoon, sometimes after school, and we'd talk about everything but what I was really thinking about. I liked how he made me feel special. Like I was this rare thing, not just a kid with a Happy Meal and a sketchbook, but someone worth paying attention to. When he asked for my number, I thought, this is it. I'm officially grown. I still remember the moment I handed him my phone, watching him punch in the digits. It felt thrilling, like I was stepping into a world I wasn't supposed to know about yet. My fingers brushed the screen, hesitated for a second, then I pressed send on the first text I ever wrote to him. "Hey, it's me." His reply came almost immediately. "You cute. You're always going to be my favorite artist." That first text stayed with me for days. I showed it to my best friend like it was a badge of honor. "He thinks I'm cool." I told her, my voice a little higher than usual. "He really listens." She shrugged, told me to be careful, but I didn't want to hear it. Middle school kids always try to act like they're grown anyway. Everybody's pretending. I was just pretending better. Sometimes he'd ask me stuff that fell off, but he always said it like it was a joke, so I played along. Like out of nowhere, he'd be like, "Do you say the N-word? Be real." Or "What would you do if someone called you that at school?" And then one day he asked, "So can I get an N-word pass? You cool like that, right?" I remember laughing, but not because it was funny, more like I didn't know what else to do. Then he hit me with, "I'll trade you $5 and a Sprite if you will be my personal slave for a day." And when I froze a little, he was like, "Chill. I'm joking." "Damn, you're sensitive." He'd sometimes try to talk hood around me too, saying stuff like "on gang," or "yo, you trying to wild out," in this fake deep voice that didn't even sound like him. At the time, I didn't know what the hell he was on. But looking back now, he was testing me. The text started innocently. "What are you drawing now? Did you finish your homework? You watching that new Stranger Things?" He even sent me links to music playlists he said reminded him of me. But over time, things got a little different, a little heavier. He'd ask stuff that made me pause, questions about my body, if I'd started changing yet, who I liked, if anyone had kissed me. I felt weird, but also proud to answer. Like I was a grown woman sharing secrets with a friend. Sometimes I get texts when I was supposed to be asleep. "Bet you look good in your PJs. You staying up late just thinking about me?" I told myself it was a joke, that he was just being funny. It was part of the game. I was learning the rules. I wanted to be in it. After all, kids at school were trading stories about boys and crushes like it was some kind of competition. I didn't want to be the only one who'd never been talked to like that. But even then, there were moments when my stomach flipped. When he asked if I started growing hair yet, or sent me a picture of his hand gripping a pillow. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I didn't want to lose him. And besides, I thought I was grown enough to handle it. I thought I knew what I was doing. Still, I kept going to McDonald's, even on days I didn't have much money. Sometimes I'd sit farther away, pretending not to notice him watching me. I told myself I was just being cautious. I told myself I was in control. But the truth was, it was getting harder to breathe when he was around. Like the air was thicker, heavier, and I didn't know how to make it stop. It wasn't like I told my mom about any of it. I knew she wouldn't understand. She was busy with work, with bills, with trying to keep everything together. And I was supposed to be a kid, not dealing with this stuff. So I kept it all inside, tucked away under layers of laughs and texts and drawings. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way his smile sometimes didn't reach his eyes. The way his questions stopped being about me and started being about control. But back then, I was 11 and I thought I was grown. And that was my mistake. I thought blocking his number would end it. When my mom found the texts, she didn't scream or curse like I thought she would. She just stared at me, emotionless. Then she said real quietly, "You blocked that boy. Don't answer. Don't go back there. Understand me." I nodded. She didn't say anything else. Just walked out the room and left me sitting there with my heart pounding and my phone locked in her hand. I told her I'd stop going to McDonald's. And for a while I did. I stayed home after school, watched anime reruns on my tablet, sketched in silence. My bestie kept texting me to hang out, but I kept saying no. I wanted to be good, I really did. But something about the quiet made me feel itchy. I missed the way he made me feel seen. Like I wasn't just some awkward kid with Velcro sneakers that I missed the attention. Even if the words were weird sometimes. Even if the questions made my stomach twist. So one Friday when my mom had a double shift, I walked back to the McDonald's. I told myself I wasn't going to talk to him. I just sit, eat, leave. That was it. I had $10 from babysitting my cousin the weekend before. I ordered a Happy Meal, even though I told myself I wasn't a little kid anymore. It just felt safe, familiar. He was already inside. Same hoodie, same old backpack, same smile, but it didn't look soft this time. It looked sharp. He watched me sit down in the booth by the window like he'd been waiting. I thought he'd maybe give me a nod from across the room. Instead, he walked straight over and slid in next to me. Next to me, not across. Right there on the same side, his body pressed against mine. I stiffened, staring at the tray in front of me, my hands shaking a little as I opened the tiny milk jug. "You've been avoiding me," he said low and flat. I tried to laugh. "Nah, I've just been busy. Homework and stuff." He didn't laugh back. Instead, his leg pressed harder against mine, and I could feel how much taller, how much bigger he was. He was taking up all the space. I suddenly felt how small my arms were. How my hoodie sleeves still bunched up at the wrists because I hadn't hit that growth spurt yet. I wasn't grown. I wasn't even close. He leaned in, hot-ass breath hitting my face. "I thought you were different," he said. "I thought you could handle grown-up things. But you just like the rest of them little girls." Scared. My whole body went still. Then, without warning, he put his hand on my thigh hard. He gripped it tight, his fingers digging in like he was trying to leave a mark. I winced, but I didn't say anything. My whole brain just shut off. He wasn't looking at me anymore, just staring straight ahead, his fingers still pressing into the soft part above my knee. "I thought you were actually mature," he said, almost like he was sad. Guess I was wrong. I don't even remember standing up. I just remember the sound of the tray clattering to the floor, my fries spilling under the table, the little toy bouncing out of the box and rolling near his foot. I didn't stop to grab it. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door like I had somewhere to be, then ran the second my feet hit the sidewalk. I didn't cry until I got home. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my friend. I just went straight to my room, curled under the blanket, and felt my thigh throbbing where his fingers had been. After that, I didn't go anywhere but school and home. Even walking past that McDonald's made my stomach twist. That Friday was the last time I tried to act grown. It was the last time I let myself believe I was in control. Looking back now, he saw me alone. He saw how eager I was to be taken seriously. How easy it was to plant compliments like seeds and watch them grow into something he could use. And I gave him room. I let him sit next to me. I laughed when he said creepy things. I answered texts I didn't know how to read right. But I was 11. I just knew I wanted to feel special. And he knew exactly how to use that. I think about that grip on my thigh more than I want to admit. Not because it hurt, but because it changed something in me. That moment snapped the fantasy clean in half. I wasn't grown. I was a little girl in a hoodie too big and a heart too soft to carry the weight he put on it. I remember how fast the fear came rushing in, how fake all the flirting felt after that. I remember the silence afterward, the kind that sticks to you. Now that I'm 21, I catch myself watching girls like I used to be, sitting at McDonald's, earbuds in, doodling on napkins, thinking they got it all figured out. And I want to tell them, baby, you don't. That's not your fault. It's his. The older boy who keeps showing up where you feel safe. The one who talks to you like you're different, like you're smarter than everyone else, like he's doing you a favor just by paying attention. That boy doesn't think you're special. He thinks you're easy to fool. I'm not ashamed of being that little girl anymore. I was soft and bright and curious, and he mistook all that for permission. But I'm angry with her. I wish somebody had caught me walking into that McDonald's and told me to go home. I wish I had believed my mom the first time. I wish I had known that no grown man should ever have been paying that much attention to a kid. To the high school boy who saw a little girl and thought she was something to play with, let's not ever meet again.